Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Welcome on,
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Medium Large Sports Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Anthony Witrado for the first time in a few weeks that he and I are back together on Tuesday nights. And then I'm going to call him a special guest for tonight because we got boots on the ground in Arizona. Matthew Moreno, who's going to be with us for the first 15 minutes or so. Matt, the chat, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, people are lively tonight. They're already mad at me, I think. They're already mad at Anthony. So you have avoided some bullets so far. So I guess congrats to you for that.
Yeah, but I'll fall on the sword for this one. We were late because of me. I was getting organized and different thoughts and stuff for what we were going to discuss tonight. So you guys can lay off Jeff and Anthony. Jeff was not dealing with kid issues. He was in here on time. Anthony was in here on time. It was my fault. I'm broadcasting from an undisclosed location. I won't share where I am because I don't want anybody to come like egg the house or anything. But yes, it was me. You can blame me for tonight.
And Anthony, good to have you back as well. Like I said, I think I was gone a couple weeks ago. Then we had a special guest last week. So it's been a few weeks for us, but it's good to see you, sir.
You too, sir. Your hair's looking very dapper.
I know. We got no hats. This might be the first. Is this the first DodgerHeads episode in history with no hats? We'll see. Maybe that'll change by the end. But there you go. Let's just get right into it, guys. We're going to get to some spring training position battle stuff that I'm excited, Anthony and I later, but we've got Matt for the first 15 minutes. As I said, he is in Arizona. He was at Camelback Ranch today. Got to watch some guys throw bullpens, got to watch some guys throw live batting practice, got to listen to a seminar about robot umps, all sorts of stuff. So Matt, I'm going to come to you first. I think the headline is Shohei Ohtani in more ways than one. So give us what we heard, learned, saw from Ohtani today.
Yeah, I mean, first we could get the quick thing out of the way now. Shohei Ohtani, the Dodgers are playing their first game on Thursday against the Cubs. Ohtani will not be in the lineup for the Cactus League opener. They play Friday, Saturday, Sunday as well. Not going to be playing in those games, it doesn't appear. Dave Roberts, I asked him, and Dave said, yes, it does look like the end of February, maybe beginning of March is when Ohtani will get into some Cactus League games. No real reason for concern. It's obviously not related to pitching because he's not going to be pitching in the spring. He is doing bullpen sessions, stuff like that. We'll get into that. But I think it's more of what we saw last season, where obviously he was coming off some sort of injury. And in this case, he's, as much as the elbow is the focus, he did also have left shoulder surgery during the offseason. And so he's recovering from that. No need to really rush him. The big date is obviously a month from now when they start in Tokyo. So, if you could shave off a week of at-bats of maybe some wear and tear, then it seems to be what they're doing. Just playing it safe. And Jeff, I know you and I, when we were discussing kind of the pitching aspect of things with Ohtani, we were getting a lot of comments that the Dodgers were rushing him and this and that. So everybody can rest assured they're not rushing anything with Ohtani. They're taking their time.
I want to clarify. There is reason to rush him. I will be in Arizona next week, and I will be leaving before the calendar turns to March. So there's very good reasons to be rushing him. He said end of February. Let's hope for end of February. If he plays in a game in February, then I will likely get to see it. If he waits until March, I'm in trouble. So that's the real reason we need to get this thing going. You also got to see him throw a bullpen. I believe all fastballs were the reports. Eye test. Give us the eye test. Fastball look fast or what?
Yes, it looked like maybe I might have a little bit of hard time timing it up. I think he had a little bit of zip to it.
The biggest thing I think you already thinking that, Matt. He's looking good right now.
Yeah, the big thing I think with the bullpen today compared to his first one, which was also all fastballs, was the Dodgers had their technology was working. Ohtani, after every few pitches, would turn behind and look at Will Ireton. And Will would show him the iPad, and Ohtani would kind of nod. There were a lot of laughs. There were some quick discussions in between pitches. So, by all accounts, it went well. Fastball velocity, I don't know, like fast is how I would describe it. Probably not the fastest he'll get it to, but he doesn't need to be there at this point. But yeah, everything continues to sort of trend in the right direction with Ohtani in that regard, and. We'll hear more, I'm assuming, from Dave Roberts tomorrow morning when we get to speak with him. But yeah, I mean, for now, it's all signs are pointing upwards.
Anthony, what are you curious? What do you want to ask Matt about from his time in Arizona today?
I do have a question, Arizona related. I do want to say though, first, I think that while they are being while there is legitimate reason, I think, to be cautious and slow with Shohei, the veterans always find a way to opt out of like getting out there too early.
Unless it's Freddie Freeman.
Yeah, different horse of a different color with Freddie. But you know, a lot of the teams I covered, the veteran guys were like, look, I just need to track pitches for a week, and then I just need, you know, give me 40 plate appearances and I'll be straight.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have no doubt that they are being a little extra cautious with him. I mean, he's their franchise, but I think also part of it is just like, you can't say, hey, a guy's not going to play because he just doesn't feel like it yet. Like, say that, right? So like, they're just, you know, they're kind of slow rolling him out there, which I'm fine with. Like, look, again, he's the franchise, totally fine. It really eats into Jeff and Blake's plans next week.
Yeah.
But, you know, it is what it is. But I do have a question for you, Matt. Where are you dining these days while you're training? Because the options out there are limitless.
There are a lot. And so Jeff knows from when we did our spring training trip last year, when I like travel, whether it's Arizona or I've been to Denver, San Diego, whatever the case may be, I implement a rule of sorts that I'm not going to eat anything that I can get like in LA, right? Like I want to expand.
Great rule.
I did break my own rule last night though when I got in, but with the caveat of there's not a Portillo's particularly close to me in Southern California. I don't have it with any sort of frequency. There is one I'm at my brother-in-law's. There's one not far from here, and so I did do that. But other than that, I'm going to try and do a lot of eating in. I need to stay on track. It can get baseball season can get a little hairy, and so I don't want to fall into those habits just yet.
That's Portillo's is not the place I would be breaking rules for, but we could save that conversation for another day. You did get to see a couple more pitchers throw today. Glasnow and Snell both through live batting practice and some fun competition. Chris Taylor got in there against Blake Snell. Ha-Seong Kim was one of the guys that got in there against Glasnow. So kind of take this wherever you want. Was it the pitcher that stood out? Was it the hitter that stood out? Good, bad, ugly? Take this wherever you want to.
Snell looked pretty sharp. Glasnow was not sharp. And he, like, it's in some sense to be expected. This was the first time that they're facing hitters this spring, and so it's not always going to go the pitcher's way. Matty Man is saying Chris Taylor did hit a home run. Andy Pages got a couple hits. Ha-Seong Kim, I know that, like, I sent out the video. Like, yes, he did face it. Glasnow got the better of him. I will put it, which is to sort of be expected at this point in their respective careers, right? And Jeff, I know you have shared a lot of Ha-Seong Kim thoughts, and I think you guys are going to get into it later tonight also when I hop off here. But yeah, I mean, I think honestly the standout was Blake Snell, and after that, it's also then seeing like a visual of like Tyler Glasnow is also in a Dodger uniform next to Blake Snell in a Dodger. Like this is their part of their rotation.
Yeah, the surrealness of it, like in looking at it online, was pretty awesome. And also, I think at this point in spring training, almost in every camp, the pitchers are going to be ahead of the hitters.
Yeah, which is why, and I see people in the chat saying this, like you just said, Snell looks sharp, and the guy that everybody's been crapping on for 9 months, Chris Taylor, hit a homer off Blake Snell, right, Matt?
Yes. So yeah, I mean it. There was Chris Taylor's first at bat was he attacked the first pitch, didn't work out well for him. Second at bat, he came right back, got the better of Blake Snell. And we have these videos up on our YouTube channel. So definitely once we're done here, you can check those out. Ohtani's full bullpen session, Snell's entire live BP, Glasnow's entire live BP. I know we're going to talk a little bit of Rob Manfred. Like we've got a ton of great content up. So it's a shameless plug there, as they say.
There you go.
How many pitches was like let's say Snell? What was he using in his repertoire? Was he throwing like 2 pitches only or something like that?
That I am not 100% sure. He didn't specify when we talked to him, and I couldn't tell from the angle I was at. I can tell you that Glasnow, I could tell that he wasn't particularly, based on result, like actual like quote unquote hits that batters were getting, he wasn't happy with. But also his inning was supposed to end, and he kept asking them to extend it. And so he ended up facing definitely two, maybe a third, like extra batter than the Dodgers had sort of planned on. But I think a lot of that was just like he didn't really have a good feel for things today.
Yeah, probably just try. I've seen that before too. Guys just trying to get a feel. A lot like I don't think at this point maybe that they're only throwing fastballs, but I would say it's the stuff they tend to be working on at this time in February is like, can I hit a spot with it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just probably I just want to see it come out of my hand with a guy standing in the box, like it's with a real mannequin and somebody who might actually swing the bat.
And even, expanding this further, when we got a chance to talk to Blake Snell after his live BP, he did say that to this point, he hasn't had the pitch mix conversations, game planning with the Dodgers pitching coaches yet. He said that is going to happen on Wednesday. So, and that's going to be kind of the first time they get into, he said, like pitch shapes and grips and things like that. So Anthony, yeah, to your point, like it is very much of, okay, like, can I locate this? How does this feel type of thing? So it's fun for us to sit here and discuss, but obviously like we know, and we try to remind people like good or bad, there's no reason to lean one way or the other with this.
Yeah, look, you'll hear us say 100 times on this show, we don't care about spring training game results. If we don't care about spring training game results, I can assure you we do not care all that much about live batting practice results, the week after Valentine's Day. So we've got a long way to go. And especially to Anthony's point kind of earlier about veterans, especially with veterans like Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, these are the types of guys that they could be awful for the next month of the season, and it's not going to change the way I feel about them come opening day. And so these guys are tweaking. They use these at-bats, batting practices for kind of various motives. So to try and find some real meaning in it is not that helpful. Matt, before we let you go, I do want to ask, you kind of went to it was like a media day sort of thing for spring training. Rob Manfred spoke. You got to hear about robot umpires as well. So let's start with the robot umpires, and then we can close with Manfred before you take off. It will be used in some spring training games. It's the ABS, automated balls and strikes system. It's the challenge system. So each team gets a certain number of challenges. I've seen this in play at a AAA stadium and love it. You are notoriously get off my lawn, let the kids play, old school eye test guy. So I imagine this was not your favorite seminar you've ever sat through.
Yeah, I was definitely not the intended crowd for this today. It does seem interesting. It was. And we'll have the video up of Morgan Swart. I forget his exact title with MLB, but sort of hearing him break down kind of the process that they went through to get to this stage and how they determined what the strike zone is. And because the strike zone is, he said, fluid, and it kind of, changes on if it's a 3-0 count, it's a little bit bigger. If it's a, 2-2 count, it's a little bit smaller. To hear somebody from MLB sort of admit that was interesting, one. But two, because of that, like for the purpose of the ABS system, they've taken the strike zone based off like the player's height. And it's a percentage of like up to their chest and then down to the knees, basically. And one thing he said, like they were asked, like, did you guys think about just doing it based off of, are you worried about measurements or like batting stances? Because like if you get into, your batting stance, like that could kind of change it. And he said they were. The reason they did height instead of batting stance is because they were worried that you might see players kind of manipulate. Like if they realize in one at bat, I'm not crouched as low, like they might crouch a little bit lower to make, to really adjust the strike zone. That was interesting. Like it's not something I would have necessarily thought of.
I did
so
that.
it does. So it does seem like it. I'm not the biggest proponent of the ABS, but it does seem like, they've done as much due diligence as they can. And so now it'll be interesting to see it in some of these Cactus League games and also Grapefruit League as well. But obviously for us, we're focusing on Arizona stuff and the Dodgers specifically. It's not coming to the major leagues this year, no matter what happens, whether good, bad, or otherwise. The earliest it would be is 2026, but it seemed like even that's like an aggressive timeline.
Anthony, are you in favor of the ABS system?
I am. Yes. There's some nuance there, I think, for me. I would not mind seeing just strictly the challenge system first.
Yeah. Which I think is the plan, right? That's what we're seeing is the challenge system, right, Matt?
Yeah, but what I thought was kind of, you only get 2 challenges. If it goes in extra innings, you don't get more the way you do with like mound visits. Like that it was phrased that way specifically, and they said no, like you just get the 2.
Yeah.
And then if you get it right, you get to keep them.
Yeah, I took a picture. I'm pretty sure if you got it right that you do keep it. Yes, if each team will have 2 challenges and will retain successful challenges, for example, those that overturn the umpire's call.
Yeah. I mean, I'm for it. It needs to get better.
Yeah.
And so any step in that direction, I'm good with. If we're talking about just fully automated, I think that's a conversation I'm willing to have. I don't know if I'm fully there yet. But I think this is a baby step in the right direction. And I would it's disappointing to say that 2026 even would be an aggressive timeline. Just because like it fixed it, you have a problem.
Yeah.
And it is entirely fixable, and you refuse to fix it. That's the part of it I don't understand.
Yeah.
And we can talk about the human element of it and stuff like that. We have plenty of that. There's
Right.
6 umpires on the field during October. Like, we have plenty of human element. This one thing that they can actually get right essentially 100% of the time, quit messing around and just get it right. Like tennis does it.
True. I still sort of wish that the first step would have been maybe more like, and I am more accountability for umpires. And this is like, maybe they do hold, but I'm not inclined to believe that there's much like, I don't want to say punishment, but
They have that
accountability.
technology now, Matt, and the umpires aren't held accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I wish it would have just been more of, hey, if you had a really bad game as an umpire, like what's going on? We need to really fix this type thing rather than jumping to this. Right. But again, as Jeff said, I'm the get off my lawn guy.
And again, I've seen this with the AAA level.
Sorry, Jeff. Like Matty Man and kind of Matt here, our Matty Man and Matty Man in the chat are saying, like, this is a big change. It is a big change, but it's one that's already been underneath the hood that the general public just doesn't see. Yeah. They've been using this stuff already for different things. Obviously not to overturn calls and clearly not for umpire accountability, but this technology has been in stadiums already. It's just not being used in that way. They use it for different things. So while the rule change would be, obviously a big deal, like the fact that they have this has been there.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify, because again, having seen this at the AAA level, like in most people's minds, you might be thinking of the NBA or the NFL and like the archaic version of replay that's like a 3-minute pause in the game. Like if you watch the NFL this year, there were the calls where they were just getting corrected immediately, and it was just buzzed down to them and said like, hey, you got the spot wrong. You need to move the ball back. I mean, literally what happens is if the challenge is made, the umpire turns around and says, batter is challenging strike. And then you look at the Jumbotron, and just like in tennis, they show you a picture of the strike zone and where the ball hits it. And if it's a ball or a strike, it says it right there. And then everybody sees it and you just move on. I mean, we're talking like 4 seconds. It's super seamless. The technology is good. I've joked. I think it's hilarious because then the umpire has to just kind of wear in front of all of the people in the building that they either got it right and they're looking at the batter like, take that, or it's like you get challenged 6 times and you're wrong all 6 times. It's like, that's going to be embarrassing. There's your accountability for you, Matt. So you've got one more thought on this. We'll talk Manfred and let you go, but close us out on the balls and strikes here, Matt.
The other wrinkle to this that I think is going to be most interesting to watch is Morgan Swart again from MLB, and I don't have his exact title, so I apologize for that.
I looked it up. I think he's the executive vice president of baseball operations.
Yes, that sounds right. He with broadcasts, like we're used to watching broadcasts with the proverbial strike zone box on our screen. It seems like MLB wants to do away with that because it does, which we have known, but like to the general fan, that box isn't necessarily the strike zone. It's not really accurate, and it definitely doesn't mesh well with the strike zone that ABS has. And so that if this gets to the major league level, that will be interesting to see like how fans take to that sort of adjustment, because the box will either be modified. And again, we'll have this up on our YouTube channel so you guys will be able to see it, the different sort of options, but it seems like they do want to just completely do away with that. Also, because he said, if you're at stadiums, games are being broadcast on a TV every 3 feet. If a fan sees like on the box that it wasn't a strike or was a strike, they could yell like challenge and influence the player to challenge or not. And then that becomes a form of cheating. which MLB, which is certainly
So speaking of accountability,
they're not going to allow any teams. Yes,
and to a little bit to your point here, Matt, too, is and I know we're trying to move off this topic. Sorry, but this is interesting to me. This is a really good one. The more that they get in bed with gambling, also,
I was going to say
this becomes a much, much bigger factor.
You have to get it right. Yeah. I see people saying like the tradition, all that. And I know people don't want to hear that, but when there's hundreds of millions of dollars and it's being legalized, you need to have an form of accountability that takes this all out of the hands of a very broken and imperfect person standing behind the dish. Matt, before you go, let's talk Rob Manfred real quick. He spoke at this same kind of media availability press conference. The thing that I thought that he said that was the most interesting was he did say that disparity is at the top of his list of concerns when it comes to Major League Baseball. However, he said he's not critical of the Dodgers as much as if he were going to be critical of anything, he would be critical of the system. The Dodgers are playing by the rules, so I'm not going to be critical of the Dodgers, but I might be critical of the system that has the rules that the Dodgers are playing by. That to me was kind of the most interesting sort of, and to be fair, like Manfred gets crapped on a lot and probably rightfully so. Like I actually kind of thought this was a pretty fair statement from him. My take. Your thoughts, Matt? Sorry, to you.
I thought so. No, it's fine. This was another. He said these similar thoughts at an owners meeting recently, and he defended the Dodgers. And I thought that okay, like that makes sense. But I feel like tonight, like he sort of was defending them by saying, like, I'm not going to criticize them. But then also saying, but there is this that I'm worried about. There is the system that is allowing it that we probably need to fix. He did say again, Jeff, you and I joked about it last time, that he gets a bunch of emails from fans that are concerned. So that's like, I sort of feel like he was talking out at like both sides of his mouth tonight. The other thing that I found interesting too, and I sent it to you guys, was he discussed the interest that free agency can drum up and why it's good to sign players. And I'm sitting here thinking like 28, 27 other teams this offseason chose not to do that. Like, and he works for the owners. Make no mistake about it. The owners, as much as he cares about the sports, the owners are who he works for. Yeah.
Yeah. And I see the admin saying he's setting up a potential salary cap without saying one of his bosses are bad. I can see
it was the first shot across the bow. That's what it was. Yeah. And he did it in a coded way so that you really would have to like sort of read between the lines, and the casual fan probably doesn't do that. But he also said something like along the lines of he doesn't want to have this argument with the MLBPA out in public like this. And so he'll say, we'll take our ideas to them or whatever he said. But make no mistake, that was the first shot of this, what's probably going to be a war between the two sides in a couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this one is most interesting because of where the owners are, because like the owners are not going to be united on this. They might be united in the sense that like 23 of the 30, a majority probably hate what the Dodgers are doing, but the Dodgers are one of those owners. Like their owners are in this. Steve Cohen is in this, although Steve Cohen's already said he's too poor to be paying this amount of money too. So
and you can't piss them off too much because they're the biggest revenue generator.
Yeah. I hear you. So Matt, thank you for hopping on for us from Arizona. Enjoy your time down there at spring training all week. As you said, check out the Dodger Blue YouTube page because we got tons of content that Matt's getting down there. Anything you're looking forward to in the next few days specifically, Matt? You kind of already got Ohtani, Glasnow, and Snell all pitching on day one. That's a pretty good start.
Yeah, so Sasaki's supposed to be facing batters tomorrow, so that'll be something that'll be exciting, and we'll have that up on our YouTube channel as quickly as possible. Maybe a potential reunion. Justin Turner signing with the Cubs, and that's who the Dodgers have on their schedule. So we'll see if we can catch up with him, depending on how quickly he gets into their camp and that's made official and all that stuff.
I love it. Well, enjoy the weather down there. Enjoy the food. Hopefully you eat better than Portillo's from here on out. And we'll have you back on this show on Sunday night.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.
See you, Matt.
Later, Matt.
All right. Let's talk a couple other things, Anthony. There were a couple things that were brought up, conversations Dave Roberts specifically said that I want to touch on briefly. And then again, I do want to get to kind of a deep dive on some of the guys in contention for the last spot. Three things I'll highlight here. The first one is Dave was asked who stood out to him so far. He listed off a few players. He said Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Tanner Scott, Bobby Miller, Teoscar Hernandez were the four that he kind of specifically called out by name as standouts. There's kind of one name on this list that I think jumps out at you.
It's not like
Yamamoto. Everybody has high expectations. Tanner Scott, big money guy. Teoscar, fan favorite. Then there's the guy who had like a 9 ERA at the major league level last year, a year after being one of the best young pitchers in baseball. Do you like? My initial reaction to this is just coach speak, trying to get in the head, because he later says, "Hey, Bobby needs to control his emotions," kind of referenced sort of the mental game, which we've talked about. So, do you buy that he's standing out, or is this Dave trying to hype up, encourage positive vibes to the guy who desperately needs them?
I don't buy it.
Okay.
Right now, I mean, these bullpens that they're throwing right now are like majority fastball. There's no hitters in the box. Like, everyone can look good. I mean, these are still professionals, right? And Bobby Miller's nasty anyway. Like, he's got the stuff. That's never been the issue. The first thing I thought of when I read the quote wasn't so much that Doc said it, but it did strike me as like they're trying to build this guy's confidence for sure. The part of that though that really made it stand out was that Doc's like the fourth guy we've heard since players arrived last week that is Bobby Miller's name has been in their mouth. Yeah. I think Glasnow said something. We've heard, Snell talked about it a little bit. I thought there might have been an offensive player too who said something, and then Dave. It's almost like there's a concerted effort to like build this guy's confidence back up, and I understand that. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying like a lot of guys are mentioning Bobby Miller so far in the first week.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And again, I think there's a number of people on our show that are optimistic about the year that Bobby Miller can have. I think it's an uphill battle to get even on the roster is his problem with some of the stuff that we've talked about on this show with Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin and options and service time and all that kind of a thing. But we'll see. I mean, again, this is one of those guys where when I say that spring training stuff doesn't matter for a young guy like Bobby Miller, I think it does. Like, I'm not worried about what Freddie Freeman does or Blake Snell does over the next month. But a guy like Bobby Miller, a guy like Andy Pages, James Outman, those types, the young guys who are trying to prove themselves, trying to improve and trying to earn their way into something, those are the names that I pay attention to because I think these battles matter and these stats matter. A couple other things they said about Miller in particular, when asked what does Miller need to show, he said he needs to control his emotions, execute pitches, and sequencing. But he did add that he is healthy. Matthew Moreno pointed out to us that Brandon Gomes had referenced some knee issues that Bobby Miller was having, potentially in both knees. It was kind of unclear about what Gomes was saying, but there is that. And again, is that just coach speak to try and make excuses for your guy? Or a year ago, they told us the same thing about Gavin Stone, and guess what? They were right. He was injured. It was messing with his mechanics. He got it all fixed, and then he was immediately back to the huge prospect that everyone thought he was going to be a year ago. So it's interesting because we've seen this redemption arc 12 months ago with Gavin Stone, which makes me believe that maybe there's something to this.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that he can have a bounce back season. I do. But you're right that a guy like that does not have the luxury of working his way into the season. Right. He needs results starting in Arizona.
ASAP. Yeah.
And it's a matter of how his stuff looks. It's a matter of how he contorts himself on the mound and in the clubhouse as well. Health is also going to be a factor for him, but also like he's going to have to get hitters out.
Yeah.
He's not one of the guys who can walk out of Arizona with a 5.5 ERA over 20 innings or whatever and go, yeah, just kind of working my way through it. It's going to be fine because he won't be on the team if that happens.
Totally. And I think too, like a guy like Miller, I wonder if it's harder for him because his stuff has been so dominant on its own at every level that this is probably, like a guy, and again, I keep comparing him to Gavin Stone, who's obviously injured, but a guy like Gavin Stone has had to adjust and make adjustments prior to getting to the major league level because 95 is fast, but like it's not 100. Bobby Miller was pumping 100, so it was kind of the first time last year, I'm sure, that he really ran into any friction or resistance. And so how he responds remains to be seen. One more guy I want to mention here, and that's Chris Taylor. I thought it was interesting. Dave Roberts was asked about him, and he basically said, I don't know what Chris Taylor's role is. And there's a positive spin on this. because he kind of talked about the utility and the versatility that he has. And he could be saying like he doesn't have one specific role. He has lots of roles. And yet I think there's lots of people that are going to read this quote and hear this quote again up on our YouTube page. And they're going to say, I don't know what Chris Taylor's role is either. And I don't know why he's still here. So we mentioned he hits the home run off Blake Snell, but which side of the I don't know what Chris Taylor's role is sort of are you on?
So and this is why it's interesting, especially seeing it in black and white. When I read it the first time, I took it as he was positive about him.
Okay.
One, because he kept mentioning his health also. He mentioned his health once or twice as like a big factor, like the guy's healthy. And then a couple of times mentioned like he can play here and there and here and there.
Yeah.
And so we know what the Dodgers covet when it comes to guys who are coming off their bench, and that flexibility and that positionality is a big part of it. So I thought that what Dave was saying was essentially like, as long as he doesn't completely fall apart and it looks like he's figuring it out, he can have a spot on this team.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got the contract, and the Dodgers have not been in the business of just eating deals like that.
Yeah.
Even when guys probably shouldn't be on the roster, like we've seen a couple of these situations before. And I know the fans want to DFA him because it's not their money, but I think they're trying to get something out of it.
Yeah.
And so I understand that too. Like I get it. And the reality of it is too, is I think they also covet culture, and he's a culture guy. He's a guy who doesn't pout.
Yeah.
When he was going through he went through hell last season in terms of results.
Yeah.
We never heard anything bad about him. Like he was pouting. He never looked like he was pouting. Like, sure. Like, he was having the season he was having. He wanted to do better. Like you saw that part of it, but like guys were still on his side. You could see it in the dugout.
Yeah.
And so, that he's got that going for him. I'm not saying he should or will make the opening day roster. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when I looked at those comments, I thought this isn't all bad for Taylor.
Yeah, I don't totally disagree. And we're about to have a conversation where we talk about which guy is going to get the last starting spot on the Dodgers position player side. And we were joking with Matt when we were mentioning this segment, like Chris Taylor's not going to be in the conversation. There's 4 guys in the conversation. I don't think Chris Taylor belongs in the conversation for the starting spot. Now, but this is what's interesting though, because we're going to talk about Kike Hernandez, Ha-Seong Kim, Andy Pages, and James Outman, who I think are the 4 guys to talk about. But what's interesting about Chris Taylor, especially in the context is, and this is going to sound weird, but the Dodgers need guys who are going to sit on the bench and never play. Because that's not going to be Pages, and it's not going to be Outman, and it probably isn't going to be Ha-Seong Kim either. And so once you get past who's starting, you need a guy like Miguel Rojas who's rarely going to play. You need a guy like Austin Barnes who's rarely going to play and is just okay with it. And I think Chris Taylor sort of fits that mold. Like you need a veteran who can just sit on the bench, who's not going to whine about not playing, who's not going to be stunting their growth somehow by not giving them regular playing time. And so, look, do I think they could have a better player than Chris Taylor potentially in that spot? Yes. But at the same time, I would much rather Chris Taylor be sitting on the major league bench doing nothing than James Outman or Andy Pages or Ha-Seong Kim not getting reps at Oklahoma City if they're not going to be playing. So I do think that's part of the conversation that we say, like, put the best 13 guys, but sometimes it's not as simple as that because only 9 guys are going to play and you got the DH, there's less pinch hitting, and you got plenty of dudes that can do what Chris Taylor does better than he does.
Yeah, totally. I definitely agree with you on that point. But yeah, like I don't want Pages or Outman on this roster if they're not playing.
Yeah, exactly.
Those guys need to get reps. They need to get reps in their positions defensively. And obviously they need to be swinging the bat. They need to be in the box. And so, sometimes it's not necessarily a matter of like who they think the better player is. It comes down to a numbers. It's math. Yeah. And if it doesn't work, and like, let's say they say Edman's going to be our center fielder, it's not like you're going to say, okay, well then Andy Pages, you're going to be on the big league roster because we think you're the better player over a guy like Chris Taylor, but you're not going to play.
Right.
Like that's not okay. You can't do that. It's bad for someone's development. And then to expect, especially a younger guy, like let's say somebody goes on the IL and now you need him to start for a week. or you need him to pinch hit in a big spot, like something like those guys. Those traits are learned, right? Like you have to kind of the veteran guys are better at those things for a reason. And so, I think that a guy like Taylor does have those kinds of things going for him in terms of how he fits onto this roster.
And the last thing I'll say is, look, we're 2023, he was an above average offensive player. 2022 and 2024, he was below average. 2024, way below average. The other piece is, like, is there a 20% chance that he gets back to being an average to above average offensive player? So like, A, it's like no risk because he's just eating up a bench spot of a guy who's never going to be playing. And B, like, who knows? Maybe the mechanics get worked out. He is such a funky swing guy that if he does dial it in, who knows? Maybe there is some value there rather than just cutting him for no reason. So,
and Dave did say, when you're going through it the way he was going through it for a while last season, and let's not forget, he did sort of bounce back. But when he was bad, Dave mentioned, like, it's so hard for a guy, especially a guy whose swing is very mechanical, the way Chris Taylor's is, to figure it out when you're getting 4 or 5 at-bats a week.
Yeah, totally. Okay, let's get to a super chat. And sorry, Stockton, you asked this question a little while ago. He said, why is Roberts not nicknamed Doc? My initial reaction was like, that's interesting. And somebody pointed out his initials are DR. So I assume that's why.
Yeah, I think it started in like the minor leagues, but that's why it's because of DR.
There you go. So thanks for the super chat. We appreciate that. Thanks to the 1,200 people, by the way, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We appreciate you for joining us again. This is DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Medium Large Sports Network. Jeff Spiegel alongside Anthony Witrado. And I want to get into a fun conversation. Sometimes we're just talking news on a show like this, Anthony, but sometimes we have a little air to breathe, get into a little bit more of an analysis kind of an element. And I want to talk about the 4 guys I've mentioned who I think are in contention for the 9th starting position come opening day, obviously assuming health. And again, these are not, these guys are, 3 of them are competing for a roster spot. Kike Hernandez has a roster spot no matter what. But all 4 of them, I think, could potentially be starters on opening day, and it would not be completely shocking. So just as a reminder of where the roster sits, the Dodgers have 12 of their 13 positions are locked in. As far as position player spots on the 13-man roster, locked in. But what is up for grabs is a starting spot. It's either at second base, in which Tommy Edman is playing center field, or it's in center field and Tommy Edman moves in and plays second base. And so the 4 guys we're going to talk about are Kike Hernandez, Andy Pages, James Outman, and Haesung Kim. And the way I want to structure this, Anthony, is for each of these guys, I'm going to make the case for this player being the starter. I'm going to give you a chance to respond. Then I'm going to make a case against this player being the starter, just focusing on them, not focusing on anybody else. Give you a chance to respond, and we'll just go through all 4 guys like that. This is in no particular order. It's just the way my brain works. So we're going to start with Kike Hernandez. And I'm curious to see how people respond to some of these, because I'll say, as I did a deep dive on numbers and splits and whatnot, there was some surprises. But here's the case for Kike Hernandez. In the second half of last season, after he put glasses on, Anthony, this is the guy who had a 766 OPS and a 112 weighted runs created plus. Maybe more interesting than that, a guy who's historically been a massive platoon guy, only plays against lefties, terrible against righties. He was actually decent, pretty good against right-handed pitching. 734 OPS against righties in not a small sample size, 125 plate appearances. He's a veteran guy who gets to play some more, I think has more of an influence on the clubhouse in a positive way. So if I'm making the case for Kike Hernandez, he's fine defensively. He can play second base. Edman can play center field. He's new Kike with the glasses on. That would be my case for Kike Hernandez. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's all fine and good. I think they signed Kike Hernandez to be a guy who can play in different parts of the diamond, and not be an everyday player.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest argument against him, is that they did not sign him for that kind of role.
Yeah.
That's not why
and
they
what
brought
makes
him
you
back.
say that? Like, how do we know that maybe they didn't see something different from Kike at the end of last year and say, hey, we think for 2025 he can be an everyday second baseman?
Then I think they would have just brought him in sooner.
Okay.
There's
some tin hat people, Anthony, that think this deal was agreed to months and months and months ago, and they just waited until pitchers and catchers report.
I'm kind of one of those people. But I think because you heard me mention like the reason why there was zero buzz about him, because you're making the case for, and I know this, we're talking hypothetically a little bit, but in making the case for him as a starter, if somebody was interested in him, they'd be making that same case too, or saying, look how good he was. He can play off of our bench.
Yeah.
And the fact that there was so little chatter about a guy who is a veteran and a guy who had a pretty fantastic October told me that people were being told, hey guys, we're going back to LA.
Yeah. And I think letting the market speak is going to come up on another player on this list. And I think that's an important data point, is that if this is the contract he got and nobody else was willing to beat it, that says something. So here's the argument against Kike Hernandez. He's fine defensively at second base. I wouldn't say he's great. I wouldn't say he's poor. He has not had a full season as an above average offensive player since 2021 and only once since 2018. He's been well below average on the whole over the last 3 years. And career, like I said, he's a platoon guy who has a 660 OPS against right-handed pitching. So I think that's the argument against, in addition to, as you said, maybe his role is more valuable elsewhere. Let's move on to James Outman. Again, this is in no particular order. Here's the case for James Outman. This is going to be an unpopular case, but I'm going to make it for the sake of conversation. I think the Dodgers' best defensive alignment is with James Outman starting in center field and Tommy Edman at second base. I think Tommy Edman is a better second baseman than he is center fielder, and I think James Outman's a very good defensive center fielder. He's the best option they have out there, I would say, defensively. This is a guy who, for his career, is a 108 weighted runs created plus guy. We're 12 months removed from a season in which his weighted runs created plus was 118. He had 23 home runs. This was a crazy stat. 2 years ago, this guy was a 4-win player, 4.0 wins above replacement. 37th best mark in all of Major League Baseball, smack between Fernando Tatis Jr., Ozzie Albies, Bo Bichette, and Bryce Harper. For context, Teoscar Hernandez posted 3.5 wins above replacement last year. He also had a nice year in AAA. I know he was bad at the Major League level, but he had a nice year at AAA last year, a 933 OPS with 17 homers in 69 games. Now, I'll just jump in and make the case against. That gives you more flexibility to go where you want. Here's the case against James Outman. I don't think I need to make this one out loud for many people. He was one of the worst offensive players in baseball last year in 156 plate appearances. This after kind of struggling to close the year in 2023. He did not come up with a huge prospect pedigree. So when a guy has one big year and then falters, if he was never expected to have the big year, I think that's worth pointing out. And then even during 2023, some of the underlying stuff was terrifying. 2nd percentile whiff rate, 6th percentile strikeout rate, 16th percentile expected batting average. He also can be optioned easily as part of the case against. So what are your thoughts on the pros and cons of James Outman?
A couple of things here. I think their best defensive lineup, if you're forcing Outman into the spot, is what you said. I think their best defensive alignment is with Edman in center and Kim at second base.
Okay. The admin agrees with you. I don't agree, but I think it's a fair argument.
The other thing is, and you've made this part of the argument before, which is it's true, but I think there's some more nuance to it. So you talked about how in that kind of breakout season he had, I think his weighted runs created plus was like a 112 or whatever it was.
Can I pause real quick? Because I people think I hate Kim. Let me make my case defensively here.
Yeah.
I think Outman and Edman are a push in center field. I don't think that's controversial. I think Edman is like the best defensive second baseman in Major League Baseball. If you go back and look at the numbers he put up a couple years ago when he was a full-time second baseman in St. Louis, like we're talking elite, like 100th percentile defensive runs saved, outs above average on defense as a second baseman. So that none of this has anything to do with what I think about Kim when I'm talking defense. So that's my 2 cents, but go for it.
That's fair. The problem with saying in this many games, this is what he's done, is it lumps in all of it together. And these are 2 separate seasons. And for a breakout player, his most important year, typically on an offensive player, is the second season when the league has a chance to adjust to him. The league clearly adjusted to him because they went, this guy, he might be the real deal. We need to also game plan for him in our pitchers meeting before the series starts. Yeah. Teams were doing that. He failed to make an adjustment in return.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a red flag.
Totally
Because not only did he fail to make the adjustment, and it was like he just looked completely lost.
Yeah.
And so for me, with Outman, that's the biggest reason why like I'm not so high on him. And this is not to say anybody is. It's why I think I don't even really consider him a serious option unless he absolutely lights it up. Like we talked about, results matter for guys trying to make the team. He has to absolutely light it up this spring.
He's clearly fourth on this list for me. Like I'll jump ahead because again, as a guy who likes James Outman, the underlying metrics in 2023, like when a guy has a breakout, you go back and look and say like, do the underlying stuff validate what we saw, or was this a fluke? And the underlying stuff said this might have been a fluke, and then 2024 seemed to confirm that it probably was a fluke. Yeah. Now, I don't think he's as bad as he was in 2024 offensively, but I think if you're a team like the Dodgers, he's like a Miguel Rojas in center field, basically. And a team like the Dodgers is going to say we could do better than that. Let's jump to Andy Pages. Case for, case against. I'll just say this. I like Andy Pages. I was surprised at how difficult it was to make a really, really strong and compelling case for Andy Pages. Yeah. Here's what I mean. He had a 100 weighted runs created plus last year. He was a league average offensive player. Yes. Here's the case for. Last year wasn't supposed to be the year that Andy Pages made the major leagues. He was coming off shoulder surgery, heading into spring training. Nobody was expecting him to tear through the way he did kind of the season before. And so I would say that last year in 2024, the case for Pages is that he was a year ahead of schedule. 2025 was always going to be the debut year for Andy Pages, the breakout year. So I think that's a case for. He had 13 home runs. He was a league average offensive player, which again, you can make the case, hey, for a rookie to be league average, not bad. His numbers actually ticked up a tiny bit in the second half of last season. So that's my case for Pages. Here's my case against Pages. The defense terrifies me in center field. Maybe he improves, but he's definitely more of a right fielder than he is a center fielder. And you'd still have to project a jump offensively, I think, to justify putting him ahead of some of the other guys on this list.
Yeah, I think he almost feels to me like a luxury.
Okay. What do you mean by
that? Because, and like I said, I consider Outman where I considered him. He is fourth and looking way in on the rest of this group for me.
Yeah.
And with that now I say, okay, where does Pages fit in? And I say luxury because it's like, if this guy gives you something and forces his way into the lineup, you are going to be like, this is already going to be a dynamite offense, we think.
Yeah.
You get that much better. But I think maybe sometimes the long ball clouded people's like view of what he actually was. Like he got benched for a good long time. Like he was pretty bad for a while.
Yeah. Plus base running. Let's not forget the base running.
Yeah. And I mean, you and I were coming on Tuesday and Friday nights after games, and we were like, what was that we just watched in center field?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a circus sometimes with him. And, granted, he was playing out of position. Like that's not his fault. Yeah. But I just see him as a guy who, and like I said earlier, you don't want to keep him on the bench. So you want him getting at bats. But if he forces his way over the next month and a half into the opening day roster, I'm okay with that because it means maybe he's found it. And if you get that kind of production from that guy, you live with the defense in center field, you move Edman to the infield, and that offense becomes just absolutely impossible to pitch to.
Yeah. And again, I see the admin saying Pages is definitely the best offensive player of this group. I think that's fair. And part of that is because even if he's league average, I think you can, nobody else was above league average last year. So I think you can frame this in whatever way you want. You could say, hey, he's the best offensive option. True. He also might be a league average hitter. So like, if you can make it sound way better than it is one way, or make it sound way worse than it is the other, I think if you're making the case for Pages, you're projecting a jump in year two. And as you pointed out with Outman, that's challenging, not impossible. You can make a case with the shoulder injury, his coming back the timeline, that it could be there. Heck, I think he's going to be better defensively in center field than what we saw last year. For the same reason, I believe Mookie's going to be better at short. He's got a full sort of spring training to focus on learning that position. That's, not full on new. But that's that. Let's get to Ha-Seong Kim. The case for Ha-Seong Kim, he plays second base, which is seemingly the position that is most open with the trade of Gavin Lux, more so than center field. He's probably really good there. The reports that we have from the KBO are positive. He's a different approach, I think would be a case. He's kind of a bat to ball, high speed guy, which is helpful. I do think my read is that there are people that are making judgments about how good or bad Ha-Seong Kim is going to be without really ever having seen this guy play baseball, without really having a full grasp of the KBO. So I think we need to be careful to like make statements like he's going to be very good defensively, because he won some gold gloves. We then found out that those didn't exactly mean what we think they mean by golden gloves. And then he won some defensive awards. But what does that mean? We had Jung-Hoo Lee on our show who kind of broke some of that down. So that's the case.
In defense of that, they also don't mean this. They also don't mean anything here either.
Yeah, fair. Here's the case against, and I'm going to get crushed for saying that I hate this guy, but I'll just lay out my cards why I've come to the conclusion that I have. The case against him, I think, is entirely based on his offense, and it's entirely based on what you believe is possible for him. Here is why I am highly skeptical of Ha-Seong Kim. In the KBO, a hitter-friendly league, he was a good, not great offensive player. 118 weighted runs created plus, meaning he was 18% above average offensively in that league. That's like a solid number, not spectacular, but solid. Again, a much lesser league than Major League Baseball. For context on that number, Ha-Seong Kim, who came over 3 or 4 years ago, had a 141 weighted runs created plus his last year in Korea. Jung-Hoo Lee, who came over last year, had a 162, 174, 139 weighted runs created plus before coming over. So I'm simply making the point that both of these guys came over and were far better superstar. They were superstars in Korea and came over to the United States. Ha-Seong Kim was not a superstar in Korea. He was a very good player who came over. Ha-Seong Kim went from 141 weighted runs created plus to, in his first year as a rookie, 71. His weighted runs created plus dropped 70 points. In the 3 years since, he has gone 105, 110, 101. So bounced back, but went from one of the best players in Korea to basically league average offensively. Jung-Hoo Lee, only 158 plate appearances, but keep in mind, that's not nothing. It's not like he played 5 games. His number went from 139 to 83 in his first year before getting injured. So 2 players who started from a much higher place offensively than Ha-Seong Kim, whose weighted runs created plus has dropped 50 to 70 points in their first year in the United States. I am not saying that Ha-Seong Kim is never going to be good. I'm saying historically, players who come over from the KBO have an incredibly difficult time adjusting to Major League pitching in their first season. I'll also point out that he signed a 3-year, $12 million deal, which tells me something about what the rest of the league believes about Ha-Seong Kim. He also signed a deal that has a very friendly 2-year team option tacked on to the end if the Dodgers want it, and was not able to negotiate out of he can now be sent down to the minor leagues if the Dodgers want to. He wasn't able to get that out of his contract. That was a huge deal in Korea that he had it. So
they also there's something. I'll jump in here. There's also something to that though, in that the team still had Gavin Lux and they were not sure that they could trade him.
Yeah, totally. And there's interesting stories about they told Ha-Seong Kim, hey, we're going to move Lux and sign you. But here's if I could summarize the history of KBO guys coming to the major leagues as rookies is really, really bad. And when I say the history is really, really bad, it was really, really bad with players who are way better than Ha-Seong Kim in Korea. That's number one. And number two is, if you just take a step back, as all of us sitting here saying we've never seen him play, we've never, we've read the same things that everybody else has, and we just look at what the market said about Ha-Seong Kim. He was not one of the top free agents in Major League Baseball. When Ha-Seong Kim came over, he was. Ha-Seong Kim was not. He signed a contract for $4 million a year over 3 years with incredibly team-friendly terms on the back end of it. I just look at those two things. And again, 2026, we're going to be having an entirely different conversation. This is why I'm skeptical. This would be the case against him as the starting second baseman on opening day.
Part of my thought process here has very little to do with him. It has more to do with Edman and what the infield looks like.
Okay.
If I'm going to move Edman into the infield, and I'm not saying that the Dodgers might not do this, is what I'm saying. This is my opinion. If you're going to bring Kim into the infield, if you're going to bring Edman into the infield, move him to shortstop.
Well, that's not happening.
Oh, right. I'm just saying this is, but in my eye, it's dumb to bring Edman into the infield for Outman like let's say Outman, like let's say you're prioritizing defense in center field.
Yeah.
So the answer is not Paez. I would just leave Edman out there and play Kim at second base. And if he gives you, look, he's not being signed. He's not Shohei Ohtani, right? Like he's not Teoscar Hernandez, where you're expecting this guy offensively to be an all-star. Like, don't look totally overmatched the way James Outman did last year. Have some bat to ball skills, and none of this is guaranteed.
Yeah,
but give me some of that. Be able to be a situational hitter, and when it needs to happen, and plays and give me stellar defense at second base.
Yeah,
and I think his contract is a win.
Yeah,
because the other thing is too is like I don't know how much he develops if you put him in OKC.
Yeah,
like I would rather see what he can do here now and then make that assessment later versus sending him down and let's say bringing Outman up and I keep bringing those two names up in the comparison because they're the two bottom ones for me, this Kim and Outman.
Yeah.
And so I think that I would rather see what he can do and how completely overmatched he is, or actually maybe he surprises some people and he adjusts just fine and he's like slightly below league average offensively with a really good glove. Then that kind of it's a little bit of a wash.
Yeah.
Whereas Outman, I want to see him keep doing it and keep getting regular at bats somewhere, and that's not going to be at the big league level, I don't think, right now.
Yeah. So you've got Outman 4th, Kim 3rd, and then Pages 1, Kike 2.
I would say Kike and then Pages. Pages would probably be number 1. It's because I just don't. I can't guarantee either Kim or Outman being on the roster.
Yeah,
and I can't put Kike number 1 because I don't think they signed him to be an everyday player.
Yeah, it's fair. And I mean, look, he could be a quote unquote everyday player without one position, right? Like it's very possible that his role ends up being
I don't
4 times a week at 4 different positions.
And that's fine, but I don't think they signed him to get 600 plate appearances is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, hey, you clearly don't believe in glasses Kike, Anthony, and that's your problem here, okay? I'll be honest, like I was fully prepared to make the Andy Pages case, and then I went back and looked at the numbers, and I was just like, it's just really hard. It's really hard to look at the offensive profile and say, like, this is the path forward. So I think it's Kike for me. I see Blake in the chat saying that the answer is Kim and Pages platooning. That would involve a Chris Taylor trade because both of those guys can't be on the roster unless Chris Taylor's off the roster, which, again, I think is what a lot of people are hoping for and expecting in that sense. But it's worth kind of pointing that out. As long as Chris Taylor is on the roster, only one of these guys can be there. And so I would go Kike 1, Pages 2, and Kim and Outman tied.
Yeah, and the other thing
I think it's the same profile with both of those guys. Honestly, I said Outman's 4th. He's probably a tick higher because I just can't get out of my head that I've at least seen it happen. Like I've at least seen it happen at the major league level, and not a little bit, but a lot. A 4-win player 2 years ago.
And then more recently, we've also seen him look like he didn't belong anywhere near a major league roster.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. And yes, I'm guessing that it's Blake as the admin. I don't know. So if
and we're also assuming here, like this stuff, we're having this discussion 4 days after Valentine's Day, and these things always seem to play themselves out in a natural sort of way, right? Like somebody ends up on the IL going into the 100%. Season. You know what I mean? Like, but assuming everyone's healthy, like this is not an easy decision to make, and it's probably why they are going to try hard to really figure out a way to move Chris Taylor. And I saw someone say they did it to Justin Turner. They did not DFA Justin Turner, right? They just didn't re-sign him as a free agent.
They chose not to re-sign him.
Yeah, exactly. So they're not in the business of like a guy with that kind of contract and just eating it. That's not to say that they're not aggressively trying to move him. I'm sure they are. Like I think they would absolutely take that if it came up. And if that happens, then it opens up some other opportunities.
Yeah. And we talked about like how much does spring training matter? This is a storyline to follow because if Pages or Outman or Kim hits the ball really, really well this spring, like it's going to matter. I think it's going to be a storyline. And likewise, if all 3 of these guys are terrible, then that's going to be a storyline too, because none of them are good enough to where like the regular season is going to happen and be like, who cares if Andy Pages hit 190 with 1 home run in spring training? He's not good enough. He hasn't earned his way to a place of who cares at that level. So I think all of these guys are going to be able to sort of at least earn something. I think some guys, Outman is probably, fighting an uphill battle. But I think if Pages is in pole position or if Kim is in pole position, then they're going to need to hit their way.
If they're all bad, Jeff, maybe devil's advocate isn't the right word because we didn't give a counterpoint to this. But if let's say they're all bad or like not god awful, but like,
yeah,
and no one strikes confidence into you going into the opening series.
Yeah.
Who do you take?
Honestly, this thought just came into my head. They got about 12 major league vets that they signed to minor league deals. I don't think it's a 0% chance that like Michael Chavis or somebody like that or Bodie who they signed. Like, I don't think it's a 0% chance that they don't just opt to like, hey, Kike, we're just going to play Kike every day and we don't want one of these other guys sitting there. Like, I'm not saying that's likely. I think as people have pointed out, you find some platoon matchups. Pages kind of lines up nicely platoon-wise with some other guys. So I guess I'd go Pages, but I don't think it's a 0% chance that there isn't some non-roster invitee that they say, what the hell, we'll just throw this guy on the roster for a month and, let things play out from there.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. That's fair. I think if they're all uninspiring, I want the 2 guys who we think maybe can be big league players in the outfield swinging the bat somewhere every day.
Yeah.
And then I just opt for defense.
Fair. And again, I think if you just laid out like, hey, let the young guys get at bats and opt for defense, I honestly think that's the case for James Outman. Is if you're like, well, like he kind of has hit the ceiling. This is who he is. He's a 4th or 5th outfielder that's really good defensively. Like you might think there's less development to happen with him offensively in the minor leagues than with a guy like Ha-Seong Kim, who you want. Maybe he's a guy as a younger guy that you want more regular bats for. Like I think that case could be made for either Outman or Kim.
But I think then Kim doesn't have to platoon.
Yeah.
And if Outman's up, you might platoon him.
You might want him platooned. Who knows? Remains to be seen. So yeah, and then Ollie says, what if they're all hitting? I think Pages has the inside track. If all these guys hit, I would guess Pages.
I would tend to agree. I think if they all hit, they opt for the power potential.
Yeah.
And say the defense be damned because we're just going to be that good offensively.
All right, let's get to some questions. JD's third, sorry for the delay here on the super chat, says, would the Dodgers ever sign a player like Gurriel with Shohei, Yoshi, and Roki on the team? Padres signed him and their fans are furious. Any thoughts? It's interesting the Padres did it because the guy that he was, I was going to say accused, like that he did make racist gestures toward is now his teammate in Yu Darvish. It's hard to say never. The Dodgers did sign Trevor Bauer. I'm just going to set that one to the side and leave that there. I find it incredibly, incredibly unlikely. Because I think he sucks.
The Bauer
He'll never be good enough to play for the Dodgers
before they signed him.
What's that?
The Bauer stuff wasn't out though before they signed him.
There were some breadcrumbs that he was a questionable person.
There was, but he didn't do anything on national TV. Trevor Bauer's always been a questionable person, from the day he entered the big leagues. But like the stuff that he was accused of, was not really out there. Like you had to do some due diligence to find that out. The stuff Gurriel did was on national TV in the World Series.
Yeah, I'm with you. So both of us are saying no. I love that the Padres did it and that their fans are pissed off about it. And it's crazy that they would do this to a guy like Yu Darvish, who's like the classiest dude ever.
He's not even a star player. Why even do it? Why even have the conversation with Yu Darvish about it? Don't sign that guy.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Exactly. Again, I'm not saying that a guy like this should be banned from baseball. I just find it hilarious that he signed with the team that has Yu Darvish on it. Like any other team, if the Royals signed him or the Rockies signed him, we wouldn't even be talking about this. But the Padres are the team, of course, that ended up signing him. Let's get some other questions if you've got them. Eden says, I heard Shohei might be pitching in April. Thoughts? He might be pitching bullpens and live batting practices and maybe some rehab appearances in April. I don't think he gets into a major league game before May. And I even wonder if early May is an optimistic view. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think earlier this winter, I said maybe May, and this was before they had said anything about him. I wouldn't be surprised if it's maybe even a little later than that now. I'm fine with that too.
Yeah.
Like I think the reason, a big part of the reason they've been so aggressive is to cover themselves for these kinds of situations.
Yeah.
You know, and then let's say you have a month where every single person on the roster who you thought was going to be on the roster is healthy, including a guy like Clayton Kershaw.
Yeah.
Then you just figure that out when it happens.
Yep. Yeah. No, I totally agree. They just have enough guys that there's like, they're not going to be desperate for starting. I mean, these are famous last words. They're not going to be desperate for starting pitching on May 1st. Like they have like 9 guys healthy right now. Like if anything, they're struggling to how to fit these guys on the roster. It's a question. I mean, we'll just get to this one. TQT, who starts, who relieves, and who goes to AAA between May, Miller, and Gonsolin? We've said on our show, Dustin May cannot be sent down to AAA without his permission, which I'm going to just like make a pretty strong, confident statement that he's not going to accept being optioned to AAA when he has the ability to be healthy and elect for free agency and go to a team that he's going to pitch as a starter reliever every single day. So Dustin May is going to be up. Tony Gonsolin can technically be optioned, but once he gets 20 days of service time, he can no longer be optioned either. And then you've got Bobby Miller, who has been a standout at camp. So for me, it's Gonsolin starts, May relieves, and Bobby Miller in AAA. And like barring something catastrophic or an injury, I don't know what the argument against that is.
For me, it's the other way around with May and Gonsolin.
Okay, so May start, Gonsolin relief.
Yeah, and I said this on the show before, and it may have been one of the shows where we were not on together. But my thinking on this is that they need to see what they have in May.
Yeah.
I think Gonsolin's floor is pretty high.
Yeah.
Not sure what his ceiling is, and so I think they know that there's a steady presence there with Gonsolin, and so I think he's a guy who they move into the bullpen at least for the short term beginning, because I think they owe it to themselves, I think, to see what May actually is as a starter.
The May one is interesting, and I can't remember if you and I had this conversation or maybe I had it with Matt. Dustin May being a free agent at the end of this year is really, really fascinating because it's hard to imagine a world. I mean, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But when a guy like hasn't done it and he's got 1 year left and the Dodgers have as many arms as they do, it just seems hard for me to believe that he's back with the Dodgers next season.
But he's done it when he's healthy, though.
Totally. But he hasn't been healthy even remotely.
Which is fair, but that's not like the Dodgers shy away from those guys.
Totally. I'm just saying, if I'm the Dodgers, I'm looking at Dustin May in 2025 is all I care about, and I want to win in 2025. I think Dustin May helps your team the most if he's a relief pitcher, because I just don't see Gonsolin's stuff playing up as a reliever. So I would just say, how does Dustin May help us win the World Series in 2025? It's as a relief pitcher. That's why I would put him there.
But I think while I talked about Gonsolin's floor, and I think he gives you a steady presence, a guy who in a great season for him has the capability to give you, if he can make you 30 starts, has the potential to give you a 2.8 kind of ERA or like a 3.3, 3.4. I think that's kind of the window that we've seen from him. Whereas May, I think if he's healthy, maybe his ceiling is higher.
Oh yeah, agreed.
And so then if he is healthy and let's say May's able to give you 23, 25 starts at a 2.3,
23 to 25 starts. I need whatever optimism juice we got going on at the Witrado household. How do
okay, but if we're saying then he's going to get hurt, then who cares? Then trade him now.
Yeah. No. I've said I wonder if he's going to get traded. I just think,
because we're assuming health with all of these guys. Like also Gonsolin's coming off a season where he didn't pitch too.
Yeah. I think we can't just blanket assume health. Like I think it's crazy to say like, well, Landon Knack and Tyler Glasnow have equal, like we're not saying they have equal chance of getting of getting hurt. Tyler Glasnow has a far greater chance of getting hurt. Dustin May has a far greater chance of getting hurt because history has told us this. And Gonsolin has also had injury stuff. It's been less consistent than Dustin May's injury issues have been. So
and we're doing that because it's Snell, Kershaw, totally. All of them. So then they're going to need all of the guys at some point.
Totally agree. But I also think it's not fair to act like Dustin May has an average injury history either. Like his odds of getting injured like the esophagus thing is weird. Like I'm setting that one to the side.
I don't count that one. So we're talking about the arm thing, which Gonsolin also just had.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, And this isn't like I don't mean to say this like I think Gonsolin can be like the best number 5 starter in baseball. I think also May can too. Like
let me read you. Yeah,
have your 5 guy have a sub 3.5 ERA is like a luxury that other teams just do not and will not maybe ever have.
Dustin May made his major league debut in 2019. He has thrown 34, 56, 23, 30, and 48 innings in 5 years. He has not pitched since 2023. Tony Gonsolin, on the other hand,
he wasn't up though for all of those seasons, right? Like
he has never been optioned. Dustin May has never been optioned.
So those are all just injury?
100%.
Okay, that's fair.
Tony Gonsolin threw 130 innings in 2022 and 103 innings in 2023 with 40, 46, and 55, but he has been optioned before. He's been optioned twice. So that's what's interesting about May. Like he has literally, since making his major league debut, other than a rehab appearance, has not pitched in the minor leagues. And yes, 2020 is short. I mean, that was 4 years ago. So like, yeah, I don't think that changes the calculus.
And I think that also tells you something about how much the Dodgers want this guy to work out.
Totally. And I think, we're going long on this one, but I think it's just the classic example of there are so many pieces at play. Like if you've got Dustin May for 1 year, do you say, like, if we put him in the bullpen, there's a greater likelihood that he's going to be available 9 months from now, and we're going to take that? Or, hey, let's throw him as a starter. The high end is going to be way higher than Tony Gonsolin. Nobody's arguing against that, but there's also like, he might be done. He might be back on the shelf in 2 months.
The other part of this though, Jeff, is I would trust Gonsolin to be able to make the move from relief to starting and stay healthy than I would I would May going, you got 25 bullets a night, or whenever you're called upon to, hey, now we need you to go 5.
Yeah, it's fair. We'll do one more question here from Morgan.
That's a good question.
Yeah. What guys do you want to see on the mound for the spring opener on Thursday? Doubt it will be too many regulars. I always laugh. The guy who I mean, I don't know if it's always, maybe the year that I remember, the guy who got the first start in spring was Michael Grove a couple of years ago. I don't know if he's graduated out of that role. I think he's had enough major league experience that maybe
throw a bullpen game.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. So, I mean, I'm trying to even think of like who would be in this game. It's going to be, I imagine, mostly guys that you've never heard of before, right? Like it's like some of these non-roster invitee guys.
I think after the starter, I think they might start a real starter.
Okay. So you want to make a guess? You want to throw something out here?
I'll say Snell.
Give me Jared Karros. Jared Karros is going to be my guess for the start. Jack Dreyer is the admin.
Actually, you know what? I could see Yamamoto also, because they need to get him built up sooner than everyone else.
That's true. That'd be interesting. Yeah, I mean, you got like, go look at the non-roster invitees. Carlos Duran would be another interesting name. I see somebody saying Jackson Ferris. I just don't see them. Jackson Ferris is a guy that they're like, we want to see you in, maybe available in 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
So it's a good question. It's a fun one. We'll see. It'll be a surprise. Ozzy said the other day the hate on Barnes wasn't fair. If Smith would be out for some time, I think he would do a good job holding down home plate. The conversation here, Anthony, was if Will Smith were injured, Bruce Kuntz came on our show and basically threw out the idea, if Will Smith was out, I think that Dalton Rushing would actually be called up and immediately made the starter. I agreed. I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah. When I heard, it was something I hadn't thought about before. And I was listening to the podcast in the car when that came up. And I went, like, it was almost like a light bulb went off. And I was like, why the hell have I not thought of that? 100%. Like, I totally agree with it. And I could see it and I would be for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think Austin Barnes is content with the role. Do I think he could handle it? Sure. Austin Barnes could handle it. Do I think he would be really bad offensively? Probably, but he would be good defensively. That he would, and people, the counter to what we're saying, which I think is not an unreasonable one, is the Dodgers might just value a guy who's actually going to like handle the pitchers the way that they want somebody to handle the pitchers, which is unlikely to be Dalton Rushing as far as game calling, defensive stuff, how he sets up, that kind of stuff. So
and that would be the veteran staff. Like they may be like, we're not throwing to this rookie.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like Kershaw probably wouldn't say it in those terms, but there's a reason Austin Barnes sticks around as long as Clayton Kershaw stuck around. And it's only because AJ Ellis retired. That's why. So, hey, everybody, 1,500 people in here on a Tuesday night. We appreciate you. Thanks for hopping in with us. Matthew Moreno, of course, joining us from spring training. Make sure you're subscribed, ring the notification bell here on the YouTube page, because as we've said, tons of content coming at you for the next 2 weeks. Matt is there this week. Blake and I will be in Arizona next week. So if anybody's going to be down in Arizona, find me or Blake on social media. Send us a note. We'd love to connect with you out at Camelback Ranch. But it's going to be fun. So we got tons of unique Dodger Heads content coming at you in the next couple of weeks as well. If you're a podcast person, Apple, Spotify, Google, go ahead, find us, subscribe, rate, review. We would greatly appreciate it. Anthony, it's good to be back. Good to be back together. It's been 3 or 4 weeks, so it's fun
I miss you, bro. Good show to come back to, too.
Exactly. We got some content. So thanks to everybody joining us. As always, we appreciate you. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the back and forth. It's all in good fun, and we appreciate it. So enjoy the rest of your night, everybody. As always, go Dodgers. And still champs.